Hello and welcome to the M.O.B report. I'm Nick Odell. Many people have had to deal with wildlife encounters on their property in some way or another, dead or alive. In addition to that, having a domestic pet requires a few rules to abide by. Well, for this segment of the M.O.B report, Channel 15's Chris Stone spoke with Animal Control Officer Jessecah Gower on ways to safely deal with domestic pets and wildlife. Let's take a look.
Thanks, Nick. Today we're here with Jessecah Gower with the Animal Control Department from the West Springfield Police Department. Jessecah, it's nice to have you today.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
So tell us a little about yourself. Tell us about your background and how you got here today.
Well, before I came to West Springfield, I worked at Thomas J. O'Connor and first volunteered there and then was employed there for a bunch of years as their volunteer and special projects coordinator. And then working side by side with the animal control officers all the time. I really loved what they did and I went through the academy. And then I started here in West Springfield on October 3rd.
So you're recent?
Recent, brand new to West Springfield.
All right, well welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Glad to have you. So what is your department responsible for?
We're responsible for basically all animal-related matters. So if it's a dog or cat, which is what our primary focus is, but we go out on wildlife calls, bats in the house, those kind of things as well.
Good to know, yeah. And like any other special or specific services that your department provides?
I'm also the animal inspector, so I go out on bite quarantines, put the animals on, put them off, we do barn inspections. We also, deal with lost pets, trying to find them and bring them back home. But primarily it's dealing with loose, stray, abandoned, homeless animals, and that sort of thing.
Nice. And we were talking earlier about a lot of things have changed legal-wise. Yeah. So are there any new laws that pertain to your department and
yeah, animal control or animal laws in general, it's under MGL 140. They're changing all the time, and we just had some really wonderful, amazing changes this past November go through. That the biggest one is the anti-tethering law. So before, you could have your dog outside on a run 24 hours a day. You no longer can do that. You can only have them outside for 5 hours in a 24-hour period. And you cannot have them outside during a winter weather advisory. Any pet, cannot be outside for more than 15 minutes at a time, and the owner must be present with the animal during that time. So anytime we have a winter weather, or any weather advisory, doesn't have to be winter, it could be during the summertime as well. Go into the summertime, and the bill talks about animals in hot cars, and it changed how animal control and police and fire and the public can handle those situations, and that we can now go in and get the animals sooner before they are in severe distress.
And not to be a tattletale or anything, but if, say, you're a neighbor and you notice your neighbor is leaving their dog or pet or whatever outside, what can they do?
You see something, you got to say something.
Yeah.
We're not going to know that Susie Q has a dog in their backyard necessarily. Right. So yeah, if you hear a dog howling, or barking at night, or you're noticing that a dog is outside all the time, give us a call. We can go out on well-being checks. You can make those calls anonymously. I don't necessarily need to know exactly who's making the call. We certainly will not tell the person that you've called about the animal. But well-being checks are really important, and a lot of, animals are, sometimes the owner just doesn't know what they're doing isn't okay, or isn't the humane thing to do, and other times there is an issue. Maybe they don't even want the animal anymore, and somebody coming to their home is actually kind of a relief for them because they have a recourse that they can take. Right.
And how about with the type of, say, a dog? There's short muzzled dogs and long muzzled dogs. Do certain types of breeds handle the weather differently?
Absolutely. So your shorter nose dogs, muzzle dogs, they aren't going to handle the heat as well as, let's say, a Nordic breed dog. And your Nordic breed dogs are going to do much better in the winter than, let's say, a short-coated, dog that doesn't have as much protection. Right. So the breed absolutely comes into play when you're talking about the weather situations. But all dogs are susceptible to, you've heard the thing, put your hand on the hot pavement,
Right.
What you feel in your hand is what they feel in their paws. Put your hand on the ice, if it's cold to you, it's cold to them.
Right.
And animals can get hypothermia, they can get heat stroke, and these things can be a huge deal for the animal's health and well-being.
I have a dog myself, and I notice anybody who has a dog, they notice, you have all types of leashes, and some don't have any leashes.
Yeah.
What are the leash laws for West Springfield?
So there's a state law that's you have to have your dog on a leash, and that is for every public property.
Right.
So that includes Midnight Park, that includes, going down Main Street. It doesn't matter where you are, the leash law is in effect. Currently, West Springfield does not have an off-leash area for animals. They are working on that. There is a dog park in the works, but it is not open yet. So anywhere you are out and about, you should absolutely have your animal on a leash. Preferably not a retractable leash.
Right, right.
And the reason being for that, people say, well, why are you anti-retractable leash? If you happen to slip or fall and the retractable leash is out, and it's going to just keep chasing your dog and hitting you down. Also, so many people get hurt, from it wrapping around because that thin wire and stuff. So I think they're a safety risk.
Sure, they can be, yeah. Now a more somber topic, dead animals. Who is responsible for the removal of dead animals on the following? It could be private property, town property, or state property.
So on public, well, first of all, let me say it's going to depend on the species too. So if it's a dog or a cat, absolutely you want to let us know, because probably somebody's missing that animal and we want to, bring them back to them. Right. So we definitely want to scan that animal for a microchip if there's any collar and tags, or maybe we have a lost report that matches, so we can get that pet back home to its family. If it's a wildlife and it's on your own personal property, I suggest putting on some gloves, double bag, and dispose in your own trash barrel, because this town does not pick up animals that are on your own property. If it's in the road, however, you just call the police non-emergency line and they can dispatch the appropriate person. State roads versus town roads is a different person that does it. And they will go out for anything that's larger than a squirrel. So.
Okay. That kind of tied into my next question was, is animal size a deciding factor for who is responsible for picking up a dead animal?
Yeah, the size itself isn't necessarily a factor, other than it has to be larger than a squirrel for them to come out. If it is a very large, thing, it's not common, I would say. So, bears and those type of things, yep. EPOs are going to want to know about those guys. But otherwise, you can just call police non-emergency and they'll dispatch the right person. Good
to know. And, what safety measures should one take if there is a dead animal on your property, whether it's a dead squirrel or a dead deer or anything?
Yeah, so it's probably going to be a little dependent on, as far as safety precautions, at that point, you're probably past the safety precaution piece. But make sure that your own animals are vaccinated. Make sure you have your own animals are protected. We have had rabies positive cases here in West Springfield since I've been here. I believe there's also been a couple of distemper cases in wildlife, although they weren't tested. The animals clearly acted like they had it. And you really just want to take a look. Why was that animal on your property? Right. And maybe shore up those things so that animals don't continue to come there.
What are some signs of rabies or distemperament in an animal? So
if you see an animal, we always get the calls about the skunk out in the daytime.
Yep.
That isn't necessarily a sign of rabies, but an animal that is acting unusual, meaning it looks like it's drunk or it's being aggressive. Instead of running away from you, it's running towards you. An animal that is just been sitting in one spot for an extended period of time and not really doing much of anything. Those are all, if it's out in the open, that's really abnormal for wildlife. Those are probably the biggest signs to be on the lookout for. Good to know.
What are some common animals that people do report that are on their property or they've had issues with in the West Springfield area?
So of course, dogs and cats, running through. We do get a lot of wildlife calls. Had a call today about foxes, a call about raccoon as well today. We live in an area where there's large conservation areas, so we're going to have a lot of wildlife. So we do get a lot of those wildlife calls, whether injured, sick, or basically reporting that they've seen them and asking us to remove them from the property, which is something we don't do.
Right, yeah, exactly. So for larger animals, and depending on the animal, what safety measures can a property owner take when there's a live animal on their property versus a dead animal?
Yeah. So you want to figure out, why is that animal, again, on your property? And most likely the reason is going to be food. If there's an animal that's, say, a skunk or a raccoon that's living under a porch, even if you remove that skunk or raccoon, another one's going to come because it's, a nice, clean, dry, warm place to sleep.
Yeah, exactly.
So you want to just kind of walk the outer perimeter of your property and see, are my trash barrels secure? Am I feeding birds? And then there's like a free buffet, in my backyard for everybody to come and get. Is there a lot of thick shrubbery, that makes a nice place to have a den and maybe raise young and that kind of thing. So just kind of got to think like an animal and walk the perimeter. And if you live in the areas close to those conservation areas, you're probably going to see more wildlife than the Main Street area.
Right, exactly. And you had mentioned at one point earlier, if you do have an animal that you can remove yourself, how far away can you take the animal?
You
or
cannot.
Can't you?
Yeah, you cannot. You can only keep it on your own property. So, I know they sell the traps at Home Depot and those kind of things, but that does not give the person license to trap and then take it to the park or something like that. I legally can't do that. It's called translocation. And there's a lot of reasons why you shouldn't do that. One, like I just said, if there's a spot on your property where a nuisance wildlife is living, you remove that nuisance wildlife and they're either going to come back or another one's going to move in. So you have to really fix the situation that you have. Two, if that animal is sick and you remove it and you put it into another area, you've just introduced a new disease into another area, so that's not good for the environment. Three, if you remove an animal and put it into a new environment, and let's say it's one of those territorial animals that are going to fight, or maybe it's going to have to, it doesn't have a food source now, that's worse for that animal than it just living on your house. So there are people that you can call. So if it's not something like, you just got skunks living under your porch, that's not something really animal control deals with, but I can certainly give referrals. And there's there's pack agents in our area. These are people that are gone through training and they're licensed with the state. There's a whole list of them on the state's website, and they can come, and they are the only people that are legally allowed to trap and remove wildlife.
Good to know. And I think, the thing is, people have good intentions when they try to relocate, but like you mentioned with the reasons just now, that doesn't benefit the animals.
Yeah, it's not. It's coming from a good spot, but it really doesn't help.
Right. And a more positive topic: potential rescue pets and animals. Do you guys collaborate with any local rescue shelters and agencies that people can utilize?
Yep. So West Springfield, when I have a stray animal, I bring them to Westfield Regional Animal Control out in Westfield, and that's where they do their stray hold. So in Massachusetts, it's mandated that dogs are given 7 days for their owners to come in and claim them. There is no such mandate for cats on the state level. West Springfield does have in their contract, though, if we find any cats, that cats are given 3 days for their owners to come forward. I know it's not always fair, some people say, but there's a lot of statistics behind that back up why doing it any longer than that isn't fair to the animal, too. Right. We do scan everybody for microchips, and our end goal, obviously, is to get everybody right back home. But in the event that they can't go back home, and after the 7 days, the legal ownership of that animal, because under the law, dogs are property, gets transferred over to Westfield Regional, and then they can place them up for adoption. If it's a dog that maybe won't kennel well, it's got really stressed out or something, they will then place them into rescue. The third option could potentially be euthanasia if it's an animal that is simply just completely unsafe to rehome. But that's very rare, and that's usually after all other avenues have been explored and exhausted. The other place that we do use here in West Springfield is Dakin Pioneer Valley Humane Society. So when I have a colony of feral or community cats that I was trapping, and there were there was a feeder but these cats aren't really owned by anybody other than the feeder. As I caught those cats, a lot of them were actually placeable, and so those guys went to day again because they're not strays, and then they went up for adoption, and they're all been homed.
Nice.
So we have two kind of options depending on what species we're looking at.
Good, plenty of choices. What are some requirements residents must do when they do rescue an animal?
Yeah. So in Massachusetts and in West Springfield, we have state law that you have to, bare minimum pet ownership, you have to rabies vaccinate all dogs, cats, and ferrets. And this is something that happens on an annual cycle. So whether it's once a year or every 3 years, your veterinarian will walk you through that process. And if it's a dog, you must license that dog with the city, and that's every single year. Here in West Springfield, you can only have 3 dogs per property unless you have more than 5 acres and have applied for a kennel license, and then you can have more than that, but that's the only way you can have more than 3 dogs here in West Springfield. So those are the bare bones minimum requirements, and of course keeping those leashes on.
Absolutely, yeah. A lot of people think, oh, it's cruel to spay and neuter and vaccinate your dog. What are the advantages of doing that?
Well, as far as vaccines, disease prevention, control. So distemper, parvo, it's not required by law that you vaccinate your animals against that. However, it's a very good idea. Those are viruses that are deadly, super expensive to treat if your animal does come down with it. And the numbers of the amount of distemper parvo cases in Massachusetts have been on the rise. So very simple to vaccinate against that disease. So for the health of the animal, that goes along with spay and neutering too. Dogs that haven't been spayed or neutered end up with mammary and testicular cancer when they get older. If you have an intact male, their hormones are driving their bodies. These aren't rational beings.
Right.
These are in the moment hormonal beings.
Sure.
And so, an intact male is going to go out looking for girlfriends. They're going to be roaming. They could potentially be more aggressive. All those things are why you want to spay and neuter. And then, of course, there are thousands of homeless animals right here in the Pioneer Valley.
Right.
So we don't really need to add to the pet overpopulation problem. And, I have some of the best dogs in the world. I love them dearly. But I know there's some other awesome best dogs in the world at shelters too. So as much as I love my dog, I would love to see others get homes too.
Exactly. So for general information, where is your department located?
So I'm out of the police department, and you can reach me there, but the best way to reach me really is by telephone or email. My number is 413-246-0993, and my email is jgower@westspringfieldpolice.org. Because I'm on the road a lot, although I'm in the office, I'm out of the office more than I'm in.
And are you guys on social media?
We are. We have a Facebook page. It's West Springfield Animal Control. We try to put Westfield Regional also puts the lost and found dogs that we bring there, but we try to share them and any other helpful tips that we come across. Try to get out there as well.
Well, Jessica, thank you for being part of the M.O.B. report.
Thanks for having me and welcome me to the town.
We hope to have you again. Absolutely, absolutely. And if you guys have any more questions or concerns regarding animal control, feel free to contact Jessica at the number listed. And of course, go on Facebook. I've seen some great pictures you guys have had of potential adoptive animals.
Yeah, I'm trying to share everybody that's up for adoption and that are still looking for their family as well.
Plenty of great information out there. So thanks again. And that's it for the M.O.B. report. I'm your host, Chris Stone, and we'll see you next time.